Who invented the firefly? What does that even mean? Who invented any animal? That's an interesting question. One that raises all kinds of other questions like what do we mean by invent and what kind of answer would qualify as reasonable? But I'm not intending to raise this odd philosophical question. The firefly is a beetle, but unlike other beetles, the firefly lights up through a chemical process called bioluminescence. While bioluminescence is not the main subject of this video, it is a major property that distinguishes fireflies from other beetles. So when I say, who invented the firefly, what I'm getting at is what is responsible for transforming the ancestor of the firefly, presumably a beetle that does not light up, into the bioluminescent insect we know today as the firefly. Many species use chemical defenses, toxic chemicals that sicken or kill predator animals to discourage them from eating the prey. It's a common strategy in these chemically defended animals to notify the predator of their toxicity. I previously made a video about this subject. Aposematism is the name for any kind of warning given by a prey animal to a predator to notify it of its danger or toxicity to deter it from attacking. If you haven't watched that video, I encourage you to see it because it explains this principle and it has some really cool pictures. Just to give one example, this toxic lionfish has fins, bands, and spikes that are hard to miss, so it's unlikely to be mistaken for an ordinary edible fish. The firefly is also toxic if eaten. Bats often die within hours if they eat a firefly, and studies demonstrate that fireflies are distasteful to bats, toads, and many birds. Toads that eat firefly larvae show typical signs of dislike, such as puffing, wiping their snouts with their forelegs, urinating, or fleeing from the prey. However, some fireflies use light flashes as a sexual signal, suggesting a role for sexual selection in bioluminescence in fireflies. Sexual selection is a form of natural selection in which one sex prefers certain features or characteristics of the other sex, giving individuals with that trait an increased chance to mate and thus to propagate their genes. So did firefly bioluminescence arise as an aposematic signal to ward off predators, or as a means to discriminate between potential mates? Considering that fireflies have been around for millions of years, how could one really know? There has been interest in looking at the larvae of fireflies. These also produce bioluminescence and yet don't reproduce at their stage of life. So sexual selection is not at play here. So the best explanation is that the larvae are using their glow to ward off predators as a form of aposematism. Secondly, phylogenetic studies have been carried out. These look at the genetic and evolutionary relationships among the relatives of fireflies. This examination suggests that ancestral fireflies used pheromones, chemical signals, for sexual communication rather than bioluminescence, and that only later was bioluminescence used as a signal for mating. Further, most fireflies that use pheromones only and not bioluminescence as sexual signals are diurnal. In other words, they're active during the day and relatively inactive at night. So what transformed the ancestral firefly into a bioluminescent beetle? The suggestion is, and more research is needed to confirm this, that the firefly started out as a daytime insect. As it began to take advantage of the opportunity to occupy a nocturnal niche, it came under intense selective pressure from bats and other animals. At dusk and at night, the bat, with its finely tuned echolocation skills, has always been a prime predator for flying insects like fireflies. This provided strong evolutionary pressure to signal toxicity through light signals. Later, in some fireflies, the bioluminescence was adopted and used as a sexual signal. It's interesting to note that the firefly is currently dated to have evolved 75 million years ago, while the bat evolved just slightly later at 65 million years ago. So several lines of evidence are pointing in a particular direction. The bioluminescence of firefly larvae, the suggestion of pheromones as mating signals in the diurnal ancestors of fireflies, and the timing of the evolutionary origin of bats and fireflies are suggesting an answer to our question. It looks like fireflies were invented by bats. Now that's pretty fascinating. If you prefer a less colorful and more precise explanation, you can say that a shift toward a nocturnal lifestyle increased predation by bats, exerting a selective pressure on fireflies to signal their toxicity to the predator. But I prefer the simpler formulation. Fireflies were invented by bats. I've provided references and qualifications in the description, some of which will help to correct for the oversimplifications that I've necessarily resorted to. Be sure to subscribe. You can follow my Instagram, and thanks a lot for watching.